This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. Bruchim Aboim to the Kollel Agar de Pirka here in Cougar Hills, New York. Parsha Shemos, Sefer Shemos. So there's a pasuk that I was bothered by for quite some time. Pasuk says like this: Parsha Shemos, Perek Daled, Pasuk Yod. Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, and Moshe said to Hashem, Bi Adoni, please, my master, Lo Yish Devarim Anochi. I'm not a man of words. You know, what do you, most people, when you ask them to speak, the most common Jewish refrain is, I'm not a speaker. Now they would be served very well actually acting upon that and not speaking. But people can't help themselves. You know, you should know when somebody gets up to speak and they start off, I'm not a speaker. Oy vay, achen vay, okay? Lo yish devarim anochi. I'm not a man of words. Gam mitmoil, not yesterday. Gam mishilshaim, not from the day before. Gam meyoz dabercha al avdecha, not even from the first time you spoke to your servant. Ki kvad peh, I'm heavy of mouth, kvad lashon, and heavy of tongue. Anochi, I am. And the question is, Rabbi Sai, what in the world is Moshe Rabbeinu telling the Ribbon Shalom? I'm not a speaker, not now, not yesterday, not from the first time we spoke. This is the first time they ever met. This is their very first encounter. This is the first time that Ribbon Shalom gives a Shalom Aleichem to Moshe Rabbeinu. So I understand Moshe Rabbeinu wants to say, I'm not a speaker, but what does he mean? I haven't been a speaker from the first time we spoke. This is the first time they spoke. What's going on over here? So I mustered up the courage, and I felt the right person to ask this question was the Shvilei Pinchas, the Pinchas Friedman, who's the Rosh Kollel of Chasidei Belz. So I actually mustered up the courage a number of years ago. Actually, I'm looking here, it was 6 years ago. And I sent him an email. I didn't know whether I'd get a response. Immediately, I got the following response, Be'angelis. I have the email over here. I have written a beautiful maimer concerning all that you mentioned. You could find it in Likutei Mamarim Shvilei Pinchas for the year 771. I think you could get it at Beagle Eyes and Bookstore, 16th Avenue, 44th Street, 718-436-1165, Pinchas. Okay? So first of all, Beagle Eyes gets free advertisement. It's a good store, Grada. And Pinchas Friedman, this was actually my first encounter with the Shvilei Pinchas. And I didn't have to go to Beagle Eyes, I already had the Sefer. But that's where this year started. And that is, what does Moshe Rabbeinu mean? I was never a speaker, not from the first time we spoke. This was their first encounter. That's question number one. Question number two, and here we have it on our sheet in number 2, where the Shvilei Pinchas asks this question, Shvilei Pinchas, Tavshin Ayin Aleph, and one of the reasons I couldn't find it is because actually it's on Parshas Va'era. Next question. God, I think He knows everything, right? So He knows what we're thinking, He knows our abilities, capabilities, He knows what we're able to do, what we're not able to do. So if the Rebbeinu Shalom charges Moshe Rabbeinu with the mission of taking Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom was aware that Moshe Rabbeinu was not a speaker, and even so He said, you're the man for the job. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu mean? I'm not a speaker. God knows whether you're a speaker or not. God knows whether He needs a speaker or not. He told you to do something, so say, whatever you do, Na'aseh v'nishma. If God tells you to do something, why is Moshe Rabbeinu, trying to wiggle out of the job? Especially he's a speaker. Ki'ilu what? Good morning, America. God doesn't know whether he's a speaker or not. Hashem says, Misam Pela Adam. Vayomer Moshe el Holakim. Mi anoichi ki elech el Paroi. V'chiyotzias b'nei Yisrael. Mitzrayim. Who am I that I should go to Paro and that I should take Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim? So we know when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to take Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu pravs anivos. Mi anoichi, who am I? Anoichi afar v'efer, v'anachnu ma. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to say, I'm not worthy for the job. So listen to how Hashem persuades Moshe Rabbeinu to take them out of Mitzrayim. Vayomer, Hashem says, Ki imach, don't worry. V'zelach ha'ois, here's a sign. Ki anochi shalachticha. B'hoitziacha es ha'am mi Mitzrayim. When you take the people out of Egypt, Tavdun es holakim ala har hazeh, you'll be able to give them the Torah on Har Sinai. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. But what Rabbi Shalom says, if you take them out of Mitzrayim, you'll give them the Torah. Oh, Moshe says, I'll give them the Torah? Fine, I'll do it. Like, so what exactly is the persuasion? Hashem's saying, I'll give you a 2-for-1 deal. You see, you don't only have to take them out of Mitzrayim, but if you take them out of Mitzrayim, you're going to get a free, a second item for 50% off, so then maybe it's kedai to do it. Like, how does Hashem persuade Moshe to take them out of Mitzrayim? If he doesn't want to take them out of Mitzrayim, he should say, I don't care what free gimmicks I'm going to get from taking them out of Mitzrayim. I don't want to take them out of Mitzrayim. How is this a 2-for-1 deal? Moshe Rabbeinu says, a bargain I can't pass by. And you would think, Rabbi Sai, if Moshe Rabbeinu is claiming he's not a speaker, and Hashem's telling him, you have 2 jobs to do, which one of these 2 jobs would you think that Moshe should hesitate to accept because he's not a speaker? Leading them out of Egypt and splitting the Red Sea, or giving them the Torah? You would think, if he has to teach them the Torah, Hashem says, take them out of Mitzrayim. Moshe says, I'm not a speaker. Hashem says, give them the Torah, teach them Bavli, Yushalmi, Sifra, Sifri, Mechilta, Medrash Rabbah, Medrash Tanchuma, Zoyar, Idra Rabbah, Raya Mehemna. Oh, no problem. Why, when it comes to taking them out of Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu is praving anivos. He doesn't want to take them out of Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu thinks he's not worthy for the job. And when it comes to giving the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say that he's not a speaker. You would think that to be able to teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael, for that you need to be a speaker. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu refuse the mission to take them out of Mitzrayim and not to give them the Torah? These are not really questions that I'm letting you answer, by the way. But anyway, yeah. Okay.
That is the real reason.
So then he should end there. What's he telling them? He said, you don't have to do anything, finished. But Hashem seems to say, if you take them out of Mitzrayim, I'll let you give them the Torah. Yeah?
How do we understand what Moshe understood from HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he said, give him the Torah, take him to Har Sinai? Did Moshe know what that means even?
Presumably. Why, when it comes to taking them out of Mitzrayim, that Moshe knew, and when it comes to giving the Torah, Moshe just thought he's going to be handing them, a Gemara, and that's it? You would see? Okay, we'll see. Let's fast forward a little bit further. Parshas V'haloischa. And we come to the episode of Miriam speaking Lashon Hara about Moshe. And Miriam and Aaron are talking, and Miriam says, who does this guy think he is to separate from his wife? Now that's something we have to look into, we have to analyze. Why, in fact, in the history of Klal Yisrael, there's only one person who's given license to separate from their wife, and that is Moshe Rabbeinu was authorized to separate from Tzipora. In fact, this is one of the 3 things that Hashem was maskim to. Moshe Rabbeinu made a limud, and Hashem agreed to it. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the only person who was allowed to separate from their spouse? And in fact, but his father wasn't supposed to do it, and Moshe Rabbeinu was authorized to do it, right? So, why was Moshe Rabbeinu allowed to? Hashem recommended, Hashem endorsed Moshe Rabbeinu's decision. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu the only person who's allowed to do such a thing? And in fact, this was the Lashon Hara of Miriam about Moshe Rabbeinu. Miriam said, Hashem speaks to me as well. Aaron, Hashem speaks to you as well. Hashem never told us to separate from our spouse. So who does Moshe Rabbeinu think he is to separate from his spouse? Vayoimru, and they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Did God only speak to Moshe? Haloi gam banu diber. He spoke to us as well. Vayishma Hashem, and God listened. So they have an accusation against Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk actually says, Vayedaber Miriam va'Aaron al Moshe al oidois ha-kushis asher lakach ki isha kushis lakach. That they spoke about the isha kushis. Now, literally, it seems to mean that they're criticizing Moshe for taking this woman who's an isha kushis. The facts are, he never married an isha kushis. Rashi says it's like Chazal Darshan. The same way, if you look at a kushis, nobody kulayama loy pligi that they're black. So too, Nobody would argue that the woman that Moshe Rabbeinu married was beautiful, right? That's what it means that he took an Isha Kushas. And the critique was not that he married her. Rashi says, V'ata Girsha, that Moshe Rabbeinu divorced Tzipora. So they have an accusation against Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu is acting arrogantly. God speaks to me, says Miriam. God speaks to you, Aaron. You never separated from your husband, from your wife. I never separated from my husband. Who does Moshe think he is? So immediately the Rebbeinu Shem comes down, Moshe Rabbeinu goes out, Hashem speaks to Miriam and Aaron, and he says, no, you know who you're talking about? How dare you speak to Moshe? Lo yichein avdi Moshe, not so my servant Moshe. B'chol beisi, in my whole house, nemanhu, he's trustworthy, he's faithful, right? Hashem says, Tmunas Hashem yabir, madua lo yireisam l'dara ba'avdi b'Moshe. He's trustworthy. He's not a thief. How is the Rebbeinu Shem addressing the taina of Miriam and Aaron? They have a taina of Moshe. That Moshe is being a Baal Gaiva. Who is he to separate from his spouse? So Rebbeinu Shem should come along and say, you know who Moshe is? He's greater than you. He has to be on call 24 hours a day to speak to me. So therefore he has to separate from his wife. Why is Rebbeinu Shem saying he's trustworthy, he's faithful? They didn't say Moshe Rabbeinu goes into the shul when the pushka is full and he leaves and all of a sudden the pushka is empty. They didn't accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of stealing money from the pushka. If they would have accused Moshe from stealing from the pushka, then the Rebbeinu Shem should come and say, what are you talking about? You're making up stories. They're not accusing Moshe Rabbeinu of dishonesty. They're accusing him of, is he holier than us? So the answer should be, he's holier than us. He's holier than you. But they're not accusing Moshe Rabbeinu of anything unfaithful. So why does Rebbeinu Shem say, B'chol beisi ne'emanhu? There's a phenomenon today, Baruch Hashem, I think in your generation it's not a problem. In the young generation, come to shul, you look carefully at people's mouths during davening. They're sucking on candies. They're chewing gum. It's an absurdity. First of all, you're not allowed to daven. You're not allowed to daven with something in your mouth. You can't daven with a candy in your mouth, gum in your mouth. It's a bizayon for the tefillah. But people are addicted to eating. People can't go even 4 minutes without eating. And the Gemara says a person can't go 3 days without eating. A person couldn't survive without eating for even 3 days. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu is the only person in history. He goes up to Har Sinai, lechem loy achal, mayim loy shasa, vayichtav al haluchos. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one human being who, so to speak, rose above the human frailty of requiring food. Why was that Moshe Rabbeinu had this ability? How did he have this human the superiority that he did not need food? How is that possible? Okay. Another interesting thing. Parshas Yisrael, Perak Yotes, Pasuk Yotes. Vayhi koil ha-shofar. And it was the sound of the shofar, hoylech v'chazek ma'od. Moshe yidaber, Moshe spoke, v'ha Elokim ya'anenu b'koil. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was different than all other Nevi'im. Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel, they saw a vision, they interpreted the vision, and they spoke a divinely inspired interpretation of the vision that they saw. God did not say this word, say that word, say it this way. No, they saw a vision, and through their own personality, they interpreted it through Nevuah. They were not given the precise words of Nevuah. Ein shnei neviim misnavim b'signon echad. Mashen ke Moshe Rabbeinu. We know there's a concept, Shechina medaberes mitoich, groinoi shel Moshe Rabbeinu. God spoke out of Moshe Rabbeinu's voice box. Moshe Rabbeinu was not given an image to interpret. God spoke straight out of his vocal cords. Moshe yedaber v'alekim yanenu b'kol. That's why the Dubno Maggid says from the Goin, Moshe Rabbeinu was hard of speech. Because in order for Klal Yisrael to recognize that it wasn't Moshe talking, but rather the Rebbeinu Shalom talking, this way the Rebbeinu Shalom made Moshe Rabbeinu heavy of speech, so that when he spoke to you and was shooting the breeze with you, he couldn't really speak clearly. And when he taught Torah, it came out, it flowed out. This indicated that it wasn't Moshe speaking, it was God speaking out of his voice box. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the one who was zoicha to this phenomenon, that God spoke out of his vocal cords? No other Navi was zoicha to this. How do we understand this in a deeper way? Why Moshe Rabbeinu was zoicha to this? And finally, the final question for now is let's go back to the original sin, the primordial sin. So Adam Arishon eats from the tree, and Hashem says, but here's the problem. Hashem said you're going to die, but why does everybody else have to die? Because Adam ate the fig, or he ate the grape, or he ate the esrog, or he ate the grain. Doesn't the Torah say, La yumsu avos al banim, v'banim la yumsu al avos, that Hashem does not punish children for the sins of their father? So why do we need to suffer? Why do we have to go to work? Why do we have to endure the curse of mankind because Adam sinned? I thought we're not responsible for the sins of our parents. That's the question. So just to review, Rabbi Isai, number one, what does Moshe Rabbeinu mean? I was never a man of words, not from the first time that I spoke to you, God. This is their first encounter. Number two, God knows whether he's a man of speech or not. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu trying to avoid the job? Number three, why when it comes to taking them out of Mitzrayim, Moshe is trying to get out of it, but to give them the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, when do we start? Why is that a job Moshe Rabbeinu is more game for? Why does Rebbeinu Shem respond to Miriam and Aaron? B'chol beisi ne'emanhu. That's not the question. We're not questioning Moshe Rabbeinu's honesty. We're questioning why he was allowed to separate from his wife. How could Moshe Rabbeinu, number 5, how could Moshe Rabbeinu go 40 days without eating? Number 6, why did the Rebbeinu Shem speak out of the voice box of Moshe Rabbeinu? And number 7, why do we suffer today for the sins of Adam Arishon? Okay, Rabbi Isai, if you came here today, you're very lucky, because we're going to learn something which is Oyom V'Noira, from the Torah of the Rama MiPano, Rabbi Menachem Azariah of Pano. Rabbi Menachem Azariah of Pano lived from the year Shin Ches to Shin Pei, 1548 to 1628. So he lived 80 years. And in your honor, I want to, in order to get a little flavor for who the Rama MiPano was, I once did this, I'm going to present you with a portrait of the Rama MiPano, courtesy of Machon Shvadron of Hebrew University. You take this picture, you could look at it, you'll chapa tziter, a little pachad from this Ish Kadosh Malach Alekim. I want to tell you a little bit about the Rama MiPano. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz writes about him in the Crazy Uplesi. He says, Harav Hagadol HaKadosh V'Hatahar Rabbeinu Menachem Azariah. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes about him in Siman Lamed Gimel. In the Yavitz, what? We'll come to that. Ish Chamudois Hamoylech B'Chachmas Ha'emes Uv'Chol Toishia Loi Eser Yadois. So he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. And Rabbi Yisrael Saruk in turn was a Talmud of the Arizal. He was a very wealthy man, the Rama MiPano, and he lived in a palace. However, he spent all of his learning in one room, which was not decorated, which was kept very plain and simple. That's where he spent his entire life. Now, he lived in Italy, and he was very involved in publishing. So the Rabbi Yosef Karoi sent him the folios of the Kesef Mishnah to publish. So the Rama MiPano was the publisher of the Kesef Mishnah, and he was a supporter of the great Makubal, the Ramak. Who's the Ramak? The Moshe Cordovero. And actually, in Moshe Cordovero's famous sefer, Pardos Rimoinim, the Rama MiPano wrote a pirush on it called the Pelach Harimoin. Now, the Ramak wrote a 16-volume work, a major work, perhaps his magnum opus, something called Or Yakar. Or Yakar. And when the Ramak passed away, the Rama MiPano very much wanted to gain ownership over the Or Yakar. So he needed to send money to the widow of the Ramak to get ownership and to have rights to the Or Yakar. So the Chida, in his entry in the Shem HaGedolim to Or Yakar, writes a fascinating thing. He says the Rama MiPano, who we said was a very wealthy man, had to send money to the widow of the Ramak. He says the Rabbonis accepted he had to send something like 250 coins, and some say 1,000 coins, to be able to purchase the rights of the Aryakar. And the only thing is, he needed somebody to speak on his behalf. So we actually have a record of the amount of money the Rama MiPano had to pay the Gedolim and Svas to be able to pay the Almana of the Rama MiPano. So here it says, he had to pay 20 coins to... He had to pay 20 coins to the Beis Yosef. Here he says like this: he had to give elef zehuvim adumim mikisa la'amanas the Ramak to be able to borrow the Aryakar, to be able to publish it, and besides that, he had to pay 20 gold coins to Rabbi Yosef Karai, 20 gold coins to the Matzreif LaKesef, 10 coins to the Alshich. The Alshich, charged less apparently, and in order for them to go and speak to the widow of the Ramak to gain access to the Aryakar. So it's very interesting. The Rama MiPano, as we mentioned, was also a Talmud of Rabbi Ezra MiPano, and then ultimately he became a Talmud of the Ramak through the Ramak Svarim, and at the end of his life he became one of the primary disciples of Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. So interesting, the Rama MiPano says, when a person gives tzedakah, the person sometimes feels, they're losing out, they're giving away, they're being chasar. So he has a very beautiful remez. He says the word tzedakah, if you use the system of atbash, the letter tzadi in atbash is a hey, the dalid is a kuf, the kuf is a dalid, and the hey is a tzadi. So basically tzedakah atbash is backward tzedakah, which indicates, like the Baal HaTurim says, v'nasanu, whatever you give to tzedakah, eventually, ultimately, comes right back at you. So now, the Rama MiPano had a custom where he would be misboided, he would go into seclusion, and he literally, his neshama would soar the heavens, and he would have a gabbai who have to come and, knock on the door, that he should snap out of it, pashut, that he doesn't leave this world. So the tradition is, it's brought in the Sefer Birkas Avram, that the Rama davened a misas neshika. Every day the shamash would come. One time there was a fire. The shamash didn't show up. And in fact, the soul of the Rama MiPano did not return back to Olam Hazeh. Now you're looking at this picture. And so the question is this an authentic picture? Is this a real picture? Is this an actual portrait of the Rama MiPano? And we mentioned that there's a lot of controversy whether in fact this is the portrait of the Rama MiPano. We have over here a fascinating tshuva, just to speak out. Shal Tshuvas Be'er Esek. Let me see if I have the actual tshuva here. Should have it here. Shal Tshuvas Be'er Esek. Shal Tshuvas Be'er Esek was written by Rav Moshe Shabati. And he writes that the Rama MiPano did not have a beard. The Rama MiPano did not have a beard. In fact, says the Be'er Esek, the Italian Mikubalim did not have beards, because they hold that even though the Zohar speaks about the Kabbalistic importance of having a beard, that somehow the Yud Gimel hairs of the beard represent the Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim. Nevertheless, that's only appropriate in Eretz Yisrael. However, says the Be'er Esek, in Chutz La'aretz, one should not have a beard. That is the opinion of the Shal Tshuvas Be'er Esek, and based on that, he says Rama MiPano and all the other Italian Mikubalim did not have a beard, based on this line of reasoning, that in Chutz La'aretz, one should not have a beard. And it says Be'er Esek, that's why the Rama MiPano, in fact, did not have a beard. So comes the Shal Tshuvas Divrei Yosef. The Divrei Yosef was written by Rabbi Yosef Irgaz, and Rabbi Yosef Irgaz is a very important figure in Jewish history. He lived from 1685 to 1730. He established yeshiva in Italy. When I was in Livorno a few years ago, they took us to the cemetery in Livorno, and we didn't know who was there, and we were zoicha to be at the kever of Rabbi Yosef Irgaz. Rabbi Yosef Irgaz wrote a sefer Shomer Emunim, which is sort of a hakdama to Limud HaKabbalah. And Rabbi Yosef Irgaz takes issue with this tshuva of the Divrei Esek. By the way, Rabbi Yosef Irgaz is a very important character in Jewish history because he was the first one at age 25 to speak out against Shabtai Tzvi. Rabbi Yosef Ergaz was the first opponent of Shabtai Tzvi. So he says that we live in very difficult times. We live in times where people try to dabble in Kabbalah and they think they actually understand it. They think they have a clear and deep comprehension of it, but really they're turning the world upside down because they have a very shallow and superficial understanding of Kabbalah. And he uses this as an introduction to challenge the Be'er Hesek. So he says, number one, he says, first of all, I spoke to Rabbi Yamin Kohen, of Regio, and he said, you cannot rely on the Be'er Hesek. That's first of all. Can't rely on the Shalsha Tshuvos Be'er Hesek. It's not a reliable source. Number two, he says, and this is a very interesting point. He says that if the Rama MiPano would have said, in other words, if the Be'er Hesek would have said that the Rama MiPano said that in Chutz Aretz you shouldn't have a beard, then I would have responded, I don't believe that the Rama MiPano said it. But he's not even saying that the Rama MiPano said that you shouldn't have a beard. He's just saying that he saw the Rama MiPano shave. Well, it says Rabbi Yosef Ergaz a very important rule, and that is, we do not rely on stories lahalacha. A story is not really meaningful lahalacha. Many people are under the misconception. You ask, why do you do this? I once saw a big Gadol B'Yisrael do this. First of all, you saw, you sure you remember correctly? One of the most nebulous things in this world is memory. Memory plays tricks on you. People think they remember things. Many things that people remember never ever happened. They think they wanted it to have happened. When you want something to have happened so badly, in your mind it actually happened. Even though it's a Baba Maisa, it never happened. But that's the best case scenario. You do not rely on stories. Maisa is not a raya. And he said, first of all, did the Rama MiPano ever get up in shul and say, you should not have a beard? If he would have said that again, I would have said, I don't believe it. But you're not even saying the Rama MiPano said you shouldn't have a beard. You're saying that you saw the Rama MiPano shave. Good, very nice. Maybe he had a rash on his face. Maybe his wife didn't want him to have a beard. Who knows what? Maybe he couldn't grow a beard. You don't know what the situation was. You can't bring a raya from a Maisa Shahaya. The fact that you say that the Rama MiPano shaved does not indicate that's the halach. You do not bring a raya from Maisas. Maisas have no bearing on the halacha, says the Divrei Yosef. By the way, he says, I want to tell you something, that I was in Manitoba. He says, if you Ani ro'isi b'Manitoba tsuras Rama v'hu bezakein mole al kol gedoisav. I saw a picture of Rama MiPano. Doesn't look like he doesn't have a beard. He has quite a heavy beard, says the Divrei Yosef, says Rabbi Yosef Ergaz, and therefore I don't believe this tradition about the Rama MiPano. And he says further that when the Be'er Hesek doesn't say the Rama MiPano shaved off his beard, he says he was mistaper bidiknei. He shaved in his beard, which implies that he taka had a beard, he just trimmed it, like many Rabbanim do. So be it as it may, the opinion of the Divrei Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Ergaz, is the Rama MiPano did have a beard, and even if he didn't, that doesn't have any indication in halacha. I will tell you that the Chassam Sofer chimed in on this machlokes, and Shuvas Chassam Sofer Archaim Sof Simin Kuf Nun Tes, and the Chassam Sofer says in Italy, none of the Gedolim had beards, and they all hinged themselves on the Avi HaMikubalim, the Rama MiPano. So it seems like the Chassam Sofer's opinion is that the Rama MiPano did not in fact have a beard, in agreement with the Be'er Hesek. By the way, the Minchas Elazar disagrees with the Chassam Sofer, but it's really a separate subject and very tangential.
Doesn't the Gemara have many cases where somebody, there's a machlokes and some Amora will say, I saw by such a basin, and they brings a ma'aser and they ask him that way.
Maybe in the Gemara, but not anymore. No, but, you can't rely on a ma'aser halacha. So the Lamaisa, if I were to ask you, did the Rama MiPano have a beard? It's machlokes achronim, whether he had a beard or not, right? So Chassam Sofer seems to say he did not. Rabbi Yosef Ergaz seems to say he did. The Be'er Hesek seems to say he did not. I will tell you that the Divrei Yosef writes that if anybody says that a person is mechuyev to have a beard lahalacha, they're a kaifer. They're a kaifer. Why? Because the Mishnah says that if you're mistaper, you're not to be megaleach with a razor, which implies you are allowed to use a scissor. So if anybody says the Divrei Yosef, that one is obligated lahalacha, that if somebody shaves their beard, they're over on Baal Tashchis, says Rama, says the Divrei Yosef, they're a koifer in the Torah Shabbat Peh. The Torah Shabbat Peh says you're not allowed to use a razor, you are allowed to use a shaver. Maybe l'Kabbalah, Kabbalistically, or al pi Chasidus, there's an inyan, but to say halachically one is obligated to, the Divrei Yosef clearly says that would be actually kfira in the Torah Shabbat Peh, and the Minchas Elazar disagrees with that sentiment as well. Okay, but be it as it may, back to the ranch. So that's just to give you a little flavor for who the Rama MiPano was, and let's come back to this year. Says the Rama MiPano based on the Medrash regarding how could it be that Adam Arishain did an Avera and everybody, all the future generations have to suffer ad hayom hazeh. What is the meaning of this? So the Medrash says something quite interesting. The Medrash says in number 12, Ad sha Adam Arishain mutal goylem, until Adam Arishain was laying there as an unformed goylem, Herolai HaKadosh Baruch Hu, called Tzadik v'Tzadik she'asad lamad mimenu. God showed Adam Arishain all the tzaddikim that were destined to come from him. There is a concept, a Kabbalistic concept, that in Adam Arishain lay, rested, was hinged, was hanging, all future neshamas of Klal Yisrael. Now, some Yeshahu Talai B'Roishai, some of these souls were on the head of Adam Arishain. V'Yeshu Talai B'Sarai, some were on the hair of Adam Arishain. Some were on the forehead, some were on his eyes, some were on his nose, some were on his mouth, some were on his ears. I know a few people who were in between the toes. Everybody had their specific location, right? As we say, location. All future souls hung on the guf of Adam Arishain. And therefore, it comes out that when Adam Arishain ate the forbidden fruit, the truth is, you ate from the forbidden fruit. All the souls of mankind, of Klal Yisrael, consumed from the fruit of Adam Arishain. In fact, when you wanted it, yeah, we have evidence. You were there, yeah? All of mankind were nene from the fruit of Adam Arishain. They were all in the guf of Adam Arishain. And when that fruit, whether it was a fig or a grain or a grape or an esrog, went down the food pipe of the esophagus of Adam Arishain, all the souls were clamoring to get some shirayim from the Eitz Hadas. There was only one soul in one location who said, I'm not taking part of this. I'm not getting involved in this. I don't want the fruit. Don't do it. I don't want you to do it. I'm going to hide out in a very comfortable place, and I'm not participating in the sin of Adam Arishain. The only person who didn't eat from the fruit was the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu? Where? What part of the body? The nose, the toes, the eyes. He was in the kaneh. He was in the windpipe of Adam Arishain. He took that, the epiglottis, he covered it up, and he says, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to have anything to do with this. I'm going to hide out in this nice, dark, quiet place. I do not want to be nene from the sin of Adam Arishain. I'm out of here. I'm not participating. And Moshe Rabbeinu was the one neshama that did not consume and was not nene from the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Therefore, says Ribbon Shalom, because you were neman, because you were faithful to me. Now the truth is, Chava was telling Adam, the woman was telling him, eat the fruit, right? Like Rashi says, misery loves company. And she was successful in persuading all the men to eat from the fruit of Adam Arishain. There's only one man who was smart enough not to listen to her, and that is Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, says the Rama MiPano, every other man in the history of the world now, Rabbi Shalom says, you listen to her the first time, you got to listen to her for the rest of your life. You cannot separate from your wife. Because a punishment for the sin that Adam Arishain listened, Kishamata l'kol eshtecha. But because Moshe Rabbeinu was neman, faithful to God, and he didn't listen to Chava, because he didn't listen to Chava, therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, says Rama MiPano, was licensed and authorized to be able to be Piresh Min Ha'isha. He's the only one who Piresh. I'll read to you the words of Rama MiPano again. I could never say this, nor could anybody. But these are the holy words of Rama MiPano at the end of number 13. Hu Piresh Min Ha'isha Zuchava Shalai Nispas Ba'atzasa V'huter Loi Lifrosh Me'ishtai. Therefore, it was permitted for him to separate from his wife. That's why. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu was in the kaneh. He was in the windpipe. Memela, when the Rebbe Shem is looking to select, whose kaneh will I speak out of? Who has kept the kaneh pristine? Who has not impugned the kaneh to the Chet of the Eitz Hadas? The Rebbe Shem specifically sought after the kaneh of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why it's Moshe Yedaber V'Alekim Yanenu B'Kol. So therefore, again, why does everybody have to suffer because of the sin of the Eitz Hadas? It's because everybody participated. But Moshe Rabbeinu did not. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu is authorized. He didn't listen to Chava. He does not have to listen to Tzipora. So now the question is, so Moshe Rabbeinu, why is he a kvad peh, kvad lashain? If anything, he should be able to speak clearly. Says the Rama MiPano, Moshe Rabbeinu, there's one little avera that he did. And what's that? If you look at number 15. Now the Rama MiPano wrote many svarim. He wrote Asara Mamoros. He wrote Maimer Tzivas Hashem. He wrote Shas Chuvas, Rama MiPano. He had many svarim, Yoinas Elem. He wrote a number of many compositions. He wrote a parish on the Rif. And in the Asara Mamoros, Rama MiPano Ois Yotes, in number 15, he says like this. There's one thing he should have done. Meaning, yes, he was not nene from the Chet of the Eitz Hadas. But if you're sitting there in the shul, and the guy next to you, during Chazar Sashatz is on his phone, so what are you going to do? Oh, it's America, mind my own business. No, you got to speak up. You have an obligation to speak up and tell the guy, where are you? Wake up, smell the coffee. We're in the middle of davening. Because Moshe Rabbeinu did not shout out and say, Klal Yisrael, what are you doing? Why are you eating from the Eitz Hadas? Moshe Rabbeinu should have spoken up. He should have been Moichiach the rest of mankind. And we know what is the punishment. What is the punishment of somebody who does not speak up when they're supposed to speak up? We know the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, where there was a conversation about the Romans, and they're praising the Romans. Rav Shimon Echai spoke up, and Rabbi Yossi was silent. So the Gemara says, Yossi sheshasak yigla. Yossi has to go into Galus. Likewise, Moshe Rabbeinu, we know we have a tradition. Moshe Rabbeinu, 40 years he was in Mitzrayim, 40 years he was in Cush, and 40 years he was in the Midbar. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to go into Galus for not speaking up and not protesting when all of these neshamos were being nene from the sin of the Eitz Hadas. So despite the fact that Moshe was in the kaneh and he was hiding out in the kaneh and he was not nene from the Eitz Hadas, nevertheless he is somewhat indicted by the fact that he did not speak up. Now, interestingly, there's another thing that the kaneh of Adam HaRishon seemed to have done wrong, and that is Adam HaRishon said something that was slightly improper. And that is when God came to Adam and he said, "Why do you eat from the fruit?" So what did Moshe Rabbeinu say? The oldest trick in the book. She told me to do it. Ha'isha asher nasati imadi, hi nasali min ha'etz va'oichel. What word did Moshe Rabbeinu use? Ha'isha asher nasata imadi. Ha'isha asher nasata imadi, says the Shvilei Pinchas, maybe to be misaking that. So Hashem said, because you didn't value your wife, you didn't honor her, and you spoke badly about her, therefore after Kabbalas HaTorah, Hashem tells Moshe, go to Klal Yisrael, Emor lahem, shuvu lachem l'oyalechem, v'yata poi amoid imadi. There are two imadis in the Chumash. One is the imadi that Adam HaRishon used to blame his wife. Hashem said, you're going to blame her? Okay, you're going to make up for that. Moshe Rabbeinu, you stick with me now. You can't go back to her. So that's also a tikkun for the sin. Actually, the Rama MiPano does say that he was kafli toiva by saying Ha'isha asher nasata imadi. Look at number 16. This comes from the Sefer Amudeha Shiva. Actually, I was once with the Shvilei Pinchas in near Bigeleisen, so I went in with him to the store. He said, you have to get the Sefer Amudeha Shiva. So I have it over here. Sefer Amudeha Shiva is an incredible Sefer of Drush. There's Rabbeinu Betzalel, the Darshan in the Kila Kedosha Slutsk in Lita. And he says something very interesting. If you look at number 16, he says, Miriam and Aaron speak about Moshe Rabbeinu. Why was Moshe porish from his wife? So Hashem says back, Vayomer Hashem, Lo yichein avdi Moshe, b'chol beisi ne'emanhu. So we asked, well, they're not accusing him of stealing. They want to know, why does he have to be porish from his wife? What do you mean he's ne'eman, he's faithful? So it says the Sefer Amudeha Shiva, what the Rebbeinu Shalom was saying was, because he was faithful to me and he didn't listen to Chava, therefore, while the fate of the rest of mankind is they have the responsibility and, so to speak, the shibud to their spouse, Moshe Rabbeinu, because he was neman to me, therefore I did not put that upon him. He is the only person, so to speak, who is freed from that. Okay, let's continue on over here, Rabbi is saying. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he's happy and he's willing to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim in order to give them the Torah. What happened to his anivus? What happened to his humility? Well, we learned from the Rama MiPano that Moshe Rabbeinu, being guilty, even though he was not neneh from the Eitz Hadas, but at the very least, he should have protested. He should have been moichiach. He should have corrected. He should have said something. He said, don't eat the fruit. God told you not to eat the fruit. So when Hashem gives him the job to teach Torah to Klal Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't prav anivos. And the reason is, he doesn't think it's a cover to give the Torah to Klal Yisrael. He figures Rebbeinu Shalom wants him to correct his error. Here, the first time around, Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to speak up. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say anything. When all the other Jews were dining and feasting on the fig, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak up. So now as a tikkun for that, when Hashem offers him the ability to give us the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu says, this is not a covet. This is, I need to do this for my personal shortcoming and my rectification. So that Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to accept. In fact, we find, there's a medrash in the beginning of Devarim, that before Moshe taught the Torah to Klal Yisrael, he taka was a kvad pel, kvad lashon. But once he taught the Torah to Klal Yisrael, we say, Marpei Lashon Eitz Chaim, he was able to speak clearly again. So perhaps the Torah, in fact, was his tikkun for being a kvad peh, ukvad lashon. And if I'm not mistaken, the Rama MiPano himself says that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was a kvad peh, ukvad lashon, is because he didn't speak up the first time. And once he gave the Torah to be misake in that, he was able to speak clearly again. But he didn't want to take us out of Mitzrayim. Why didn't he want to take us out of Mitzrayim? So, just to capture this in a nutshell, what was the purpose of Mitzrayim? We know the Navi refers to Mitzrayim as, actually, Kor HaBarzal. That's what it's referred to in Sefer Devarim, the iron furnace. So what does a furnace do? A furnace purifies. What did we need to be purified from? What were we being purified from? What was the impurity that we had that we needed to be purified from? The zuama, the filth. What filth? From what? What did we do wrong? So the Arizal says in the beginning of Sefer Shemos that the world still had not been cleansed from the sin of Adam Arishain. In fact, the Arizal al Pidarkoi learns that the various generations that have progressed until Mitzrayim were different attempts of purifying the world from the sin of Adam Arishain. Be it the Dar of Enosh, be it the Dar of the Mabul, be it the Anshe Sedaim, be it the Dar Haflaga. These were all attempts of purifying the world from the sin of the Eitz Hadas, which we know, the Arizal says, aside from eating from the Eitz Hadas, Adam Arishain was parish from his wife, by the way, for 130 years, and he was Moilid Zera, and the Dar Hamabul continued in that sin, and therefore Therefore, they had to be punished in boiling hot water, and that's the reason why by the Dar HaMabul it says Vayir Hashem Liras Ma'asa B'nei Adam, because they repeated the sin of Adam HaRishon. Be it as it may, the various wicked generations throughout Sefer Bereshis were attempts to purify the world from the sin of Adam HaRishon, which Moshe Rabbeinu indicted himself that he was responsible for the sin of Adam HaRishon. Because Moshe said to himself, I should have spoke up, I could have done something about it, I could have prevented it, I could have stopped it. So suggests the Shvilei Pinchas, when it came to taking the Jews out of Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu felt he wasn't worthy to do that job. He wasn't worthy for the task. He felt he was responsible for them being there in the first place, so that wasn't a job that he felt he was qualified to perform. Mashiach came when the Rebbeinu Shem came to Moshe Rabbeinu and he said, give the Torah to Klal Yisrael. That Moshe Rabbeinu said, oh, you want me to rectify myself? You want me to correct my own imperfections? That was something that Moshe Rabbeinu was more willing and willing to accept. By the way, one of the infractions of Moshe Rabbeinu, he was kafei tova, right? He didn't acknowledge the gift that Hashem gave him. That Adam HaRishon said, Ha'isha asher nasata imadi, he was kafei tova. Who Rabbi said these words? Toiv lahoidois lashem. Whose words are these? Adam HaRishon, David HaMelech, and what's the right answer? Moshe Rabbeinu. Mizmar, Shiur, Hashabos. Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Tefillah l'Moshe, Eshol Ekim. This is all part of Tefillah Moshe, Eshol Ekim. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu the one who says Toiv l'Hodas Hashem as a correction? He was the one who said Ha'isha asher nasata imadi. So to be misaking that, he's the one who says Toiv l'Hodas Hashem. But be it as it may, Rabbi Sai, because Adam HaRishon, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the only one who was not nena from the Eitz Hadas, so Hashem says, when it came to the Eitz Hadas, all of a sudden everyone was starving. Nobody could wait. Nobody could, the Rachaim HaKadosh says that we were supposed to eat from the Eitz Hadas. But he's supposed to wait until Shabbos came. We would have made Kiddush on the Geffen of the Eitz Hadas. But we ate prematurely. You know the people who they can't wait until the Kiddush comes out, so they have to sneak into the kitchen just wait a minute, and at the right time, it's the Eitz Hadas again. So the rest of the world could not wait a few minutes. That's why we're always hungry. Hashem said, oh, you're taka, you can't wait? You're not going to be able to wait. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who had the self-discipline not to be nena from the Eitz Hadas. Hashem says, you're the only guy who could come up to Shamayim 40 days and 40 nights. You won't be hungry, you won't be kvetching. No, when's the Kiddush? Moshe, and now Moshe Rabbeinu is able to go up to Shamayim. And the Eitz Hadas injected the world with this Zuhama. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who could go up to Shamayim, bring down the man. The man is the pristine food. There's no refuse, right? The reason why a person has to expel the psoiles is because through the sin of the Eitz Hadas, it injected a certain refuse into the food. But Moshe Rabbeinu sort of is above and beyond that. Moshe Rabbeinu never ate from the Eitz Hadas. He could bring down from Shamayim the man. When Klal Yisrael ate the man, they were very frightened. Why? Because they didn't have to expel anything. They thought they were going to be like a soita that was going to blow up in their intestines. But they didn't realize Moshe Rabbeinu was able to access like pre-Eitz Hadas food from Shemayim because Moshe Rabbeinu never was stumbled in the Eitz Hadas. Look, Marv Rabbi Sai, these are all in Yanim Lamala Mehasagasena, but just to get the words and the basic idea, it's something which is Ayam V'Naira. Coming back to our first question. So Moshe Rabbeinu is given the mission to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. Moshe says, me? I'm not a speaker. Not today, not yesterday, and not the first time we spoke when you told me not to eat from the fruit and I kept my mouth closed and I wasn't a speaker to tell everyone else not to eat from it. So I wasn't a speaker all the way back on the first day of history, and I don't think I'm the man for the job. Now, Rabbi Sai, these are some of the neflois mitaraseno that are neskala to us through the Rama MiPano. Wishing everyone a great day.
Wow. This is a gewaltig.
Send it to Moshe
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.